Hello, and welcome to Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network. It's Cindy Howes, and I am the host. Delighted to have you here. Before we get into our guest today, oh boy, it's Tim O'Brien. Let's talk about ways to stay in touch. You can sign up for our newsletter, which we send probably once a month at basicfolk.com. Click on the red sign up for the newsletter button. You can keep up to date on what is happening with our latest episodes and also hear wonderful musical musings from myself and Basic Folk's guest host, Lizzie No. Again, sign up at our website, basicfolk.com, or you can follow us on social media. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Basic Folk Pod. No longer tweeting. Basic Folk, no longer tweeting. Fine if you do. We're just not there with you. Or if you'd like, you can make a financial contribution to Basic Folk. We're a listener-supported podcast. You can give us $5 a month at basicfolk.com/donate. You can head to the shop and get a Basic Folk beanie that are hand-knit by my mom. Or you could just tell a friend, keep listening. It's all good. Okay. Tim O'Brien is one of Bluegrass's beloved players, from his work with the innovative Hot Rise to his yearly appearances at the Telluride Bluegrass Festival. He's just released his first album of all original material, which is something to be said for his 50-year career. At 69 years old, it's no surprise that the theme of aging pops up on quite a few of his new songs. He opens up about his perspective on aging and what it has looked like for his predecessors in bluegrass. He reflects on his history, from choosing Colorado over New York or LA to being very aware of how hard it was for his sister Molly O'Brien to have a solo career and be a parent. Nicknamed Red, Tim O'Brien serves as a hero and mentor to many of today's finest players in the genre, including Sarah Jarosz and Chris Thile. He recognizes the importance of allowing younger generations to step into the spotlight while still being ready to honor his bluegrass heroes. In our conversation, Tim gets into things he's noticed changing for the better in his scene, and also talks about how technology is both a good and challenging thing. For instance, in-ear monitors. They're great. However, they really isolate the players instead of really feeling like they're playing together, that sort of thing. Very interesting stuff coming from Tim O'Brien. His new album is Cup of Sugar, and from it, we're going to check out my favorite track, which, if you know me, this is like a big duh. This is your favorite track. This is the song Little Lamb, and then we'll get to our conversation with Tim O'Brien on Basic Folk.
Like spring came back around on the hillside. You're jumping up and down, lifts my heart up. See you scamper once again, you wouldn't understand. Little lamb, the winter's long, and it gets so dark and cold, it reminds me I keep on getting old. And I was young once, but I won't be young again. You wouldn't understand. Little lamb, little lamb.
Tim O'Brien, thanks so much for talking to me today. It's so great to meet you.
Good to be with you, Cindy.
One of the themes that comes up on the new record, Cup of Sugar, is aging. And I thought we'd start there. You say, I'm in my late 60s and doing fine, but I'm looking at things from that older perspective. When did that older viewpoint start showing up for you?
It's creeping all along, from age 40 on, really, you start thinking things differently. But as, I don't know, you're sort of striving a lot, to sort of fit in with everybody. And then at a certain point, you kind of start just not caring about that. You just do what you do. And it gets more and more that way. I don't know. Making records and making music, I don't really think about what other people are thinking anymore or what the trends are. I just know I do what I do. That's one part of it, one manifestation of it. But getting old, like I can't hear as well, and I can't move around as fast. I can't play as fast. Certain things I'm just not interested in doing, or I don't know. Mm-hmm. And I'm just trying to do the best I can with the time I got. And writing is the best thing I think I can do. Getting it down on tape, but I don't know as far as it affecting how I interface with the world. Is definitely I'm not gonna go do certain things anymore. It's just I don't know, just slowing down. And I wonder how long I get to do this, but I keep finding new ways to get into it.
Yeah, people are talking a lot about like longevity and aging well.
Yeah, right.
Do you feel like you're aging well, and like what has been the example set for you when it comes to aging?
Well, a lot of my heroes, they didn't. I worry about the kind of scenario where you're on the road and you're not really able to do your job justice and just keep doing it. It's like you hear these people like they're farmers or they work in a factory job that's not viable anymore. They go, I don't know what else to do. Bill Monroe, Ernest Tubb, John Hartford, they just kept traveling until they couldn't anymore, and then they were in the hospital and died. And I don't really want to do that. I want to slow down gradually, but it's hard, because I love doing what I do, and so I don't know how aging well is just one thing is like, for instance, this summer I have a job at a festival where I have a set, but I'm really the artist in residence, and I'm kind of supposed to interface with different people on the festival as kind of an elder. They're gonna. I'm going to sit in with them, and they're going to, do something that they remember that I did. Maybe I don't even remember it. So it's kind of funny. I have to look at my my whole career and kind of assess it and go, well, what do they want to do with this? I guess aging well would be letting the younger crowd on the festival circuit kind of take the forefront. They are anyway. And, I let them, just being at home with that. And it's really nice to be invited onto their shows. That's a good way of aging well, I think. It's just, I don't need to be the headliner, but I can be an important part of somebody's, influence, and that they can show that. That's really nice. Yeah. It's a feather in my cap. But, it's at Telluride last weekend. Sam Bush is a little older than me, but he's still the headliner. I'm kind of pulling back. I'm kind of falling down off the little Buffalo radar, where the younger groups are getting the better time slots and stuff. And I probably won't even be there next summer. I think they're going to start doing it every other year for me, which is it's always been every year. But I'm not drawn as much as these other groups, and there's finances to consider, and so I'm okay with that. 2 weeks before that, I was at the West Virginia Music Hall of Fame inductions and was paying tribute to the Lonesome Pine Fiddlers, and that's a group from the 30s through the 60s. And Bobby Osborne was their original lead singer for the recordings, and Paul Williams is another. So these guys are 85 and 90 years older, are there to get the award, but they didn't really want to sing. They wanted to let me sing. So I'm kind of paying tribute to them, and that kind of thing is going to start coming back on me, and it already has. I'm not sure what I'm getting at, but it's all part of, we're all part of a tradition, and it's good to for the younger crowd to remember who the folks who went before them are, and that's what I like. I like about that particular facet, but I guess it's coming back on me a little bit. It's a little bit uncomfortable sometimes. I think, well, gee, don't I have more to do? And I do, but I have to make room for everyone else. It's kind of hard. That's a hard question you asked.
We're just getting started here, Tim. All right, I wanted to ask you about radio. So you were born in Wheeling, West Virginia, which is, by the way, like very close to where I am in Pittsburgh. So very cool. As a kid, you were exposed to music like Benny Goodman, Glenn Miller, a little bit of Lawrence Welk. You started listening to and attending a live radio show, the Saturday Night Jamboree. You got to see performances by Jerry Lee Lewis, Buck Owens, Merle Haggard. The radio was so different back then, so important. Can you talk about your relationship to the radio as someone who has been listening since a young age to someone who has had songs played on the radio and then performed on the radio?
Yeah, my very first radio was a little crystal set that I think I got as a kit at Radio Shack or someplace like that. It's just you could have a single earphone, and you could use I had a heat radiator in my room that was you attach this little clip to that for the antenna, and it ran on. It didn't need any battery or anything. It was just a little crystal that accepted the signal. And the songs I heard were like The Twist by Chubby Checker, and I don't know what else. It was like 1960 or something, 62. And then that same station that would play the pop hits would also, as I was starting to play guitar, Roger Miller was on the pop radio as well as on the country radio. And so I was listening to
Wild,
pop.
right? Yeah,
I listened to pop radio, and it would be, One-Eyed, say Purple People Eater, or Teeny Weeny Itsy Bitsy Polka Dot Bikini, or it might be Elvis, it might be Chubby Checker, and then later it was the Beatles. But they also have Frank Sinatra, so it's like pop radio was kind of a big mix. And then it became more the British invasion and Motown and that kind of thing that was what pop radio was. And the middle of the road stuff was kind of shuttled to the side. And then somewhere in there, late 60s, FM radio became more important, and underground radio. And there was a station in Pittsburgh that if you were on a hilltop, you could pick up the underground radio, and they would play Jefferson Airplane and Taj Mahal, and then Muddy Waters, and then Phil Oakes, and then, The Doors. It was everything. Well, it wasn't everything. It was roots music, and all the stuff in the sort of modern pop stuff, the psychedelic kind of stuff and rock and roll stuff, Jimi Hendrix. So that kind of stuff turned me on, and so you started hearing some country sounds too as that came in with some of the groups like the Byrds doing country rock, and it got folk music and country music and rock kind of blurred a little more there, and that's when I started attending the radio show down in downtown Wheeling at the WWVA Jamboree, because it was country music, and they were professional musicians every Saturday that I could hear. I was playing the guitar, and I wanted to see other people playing the guitar, and so, but they were doing it through a country music format.
Would you have to buy a ticket?
Yeah, you had to buy a ticket, but you could buy one for $2.50 and be in the balcony and see the whole show, and you could get closer if you wanted to by going to the photo aisle. They had a little aisle on the side. You could walk up there and wait in line to take your photo. And I never had a camera, but I would go there and, wait in line to get up closer. And then as soon as I got up there, I'd wait as long as it would take to take a photo. And even though they didn't take one, I would then go back and sit down in my seat. But, that...
You took a photo in your mind.
In my mind, yeah. Jerry Lee Lewis, whenever somebody put the camera up, his foot would go up on the piano and on the keyboard. And because he wanted to look like the wild man whenever he was in a photo. So even though I didn't have I put my hand up like that, and he put his foot up on the piano.
Psych.
But, that's, you start seeing the people that are playing live on the radio, and then, that's inspiring, to see. I went to see the Beatles at the Civic Arena, and whatever was it, 1964 or something there.
September 14th, 1964.
Yeah, you got it, yeah. Anyway, that was a big thing, but the Jamboree was more like you could really get up close.
Yeah, it's like they were humanizing these musicians to you.
Yeah, right. And so that was great. And then as I got a little older, I could drive myself places, and there was nightclubs that had bluegrass, and I would go see the bluegrass groups. My friends were playing, slightly older friends. So I'd go to the bluegrass events and the folk music events. And then, when Hot Rize started, I was in other bands that, were making their living playing music, but I don't know that we ever got on the radio. Hot Rize, being in a bluegrass group, there was a little bit of an organization there for bluegrass. Every town sort of has a radio that would have maybe the public radio stations, which were kind of newer then in the early, late 70s. They would have a block of time where they play bluegrass exclusively, maybe an hour or two a week. and maybe a commercial country radio station would have that as well. And so those were the opportunities for bluegrass radio play. And the first time I really noticed what the effect of it was we played in Harrisonburg, Virginia. We traveled all the way, I think, from Colorado to start a tour there. And we went to the local college radio station and did a spot the night before and advertised the show. And a guy came to watch us through the glass. He knew we were on the radio, and he got down there to watch us, and he wanted to ask our guitar player if he had his guitar solo. He had learned it from the record that we'd put out 6 months before, and he wanted to know if he was playing it right. And it was kind of scary to realize somebody had listened that closely. And then when we played the next night, and we played our very first song. It was the first song on our record, and people just went crazy because they'd been listening to that on that radio station. And I thought, we were playing in a brand new town we'd never played before, but turned out our reputation preceded us through the radio. And that was really gratifying, because sometimes you feel like the stuff goes out into a vacuum. But it obviously had taken effect, and we saw that from time to time as we went around and realized that people had been listening. So, that's the traditional medium for musical artists is to get your music on the radio, but in bluegrass and folk music, you're kind of fighting the commercial dollars. You have promoters that are promoting the next biggest thing, and you're not that at all. But the fact that they had these niche programs, these blocks that featured bluegrass, was really helpful for us, and that continues to this day.
You're the youngest in a family of 5 children, and it seems like your siblings seem to have played like a big part in shaping your musicality. And I specifically wanted to ask you about your sister, Molly. You have made a few records together and have been performing together for nearly your whole lives. You started singing in church. You played coffee houses in high school and beyond. What was it like to learn how to perform for you? Like, were you a natural? And also, how is it to have your sister, who's pretty close in age, she's only 2 years older, learning right along with you?
It was really good to have my sister there learning. She was, just being just slightly older, she had more awareness of the music that was coming up, and I know she correct. I didn't know who Bob Dylan was. She said, "I can't believe you consider yourself a musician and you don't know who Bob Dylan is." But that was, that was before
older sister thing.
But that was Bob Dylan, 64 or something, or 65. He was just starting to go electric then. I didn't even know about him. I knew his songs through Peter, Paul, and Mary, singing "Blowing in the Wind" and you could say "Man of Constant Sorrow." They might have got that for the first Dylan record, or some other songs that they recorded of Dylan's. But she was studying piano, or taking lessons, and I took some lessons, but I was already starting the guitar, and it was good. We were both interested in music, and we had somebody just right down the hall that we could collaborate with, And I like singing harmony. I, sort of naturally find the parts just singing in church. And so if I could play the guitar and she could sing lead, I could find a harmony part. We would have a little thing, It would just be fun. So just having the access to somebody that's interested in it, that's, you're close to your age, is really, really important. You kind of egg each other on. And that same thing happens when you have other friends in school that you play with, and that continued with classmates, and then you start seeing the music scene and you meet more and more people. But that early engagement with my sister was really vital, and singing together was real simple, real easy, and there was no charge on it. It wasn't like we had to do it. We were just doing it for fun. So when we were asked to perform for functions, it was didn't seem like a lot of pressure. And I think one of the things that was really good was playing in church when the folk mass kind of thing started around. I was 12 years old when I started playing guitar, and they were just starting that maybe the year later. in the new priest.
Like the Sunday night youth group.
Well, they had the Sunday night youth groups, and they had a sort of a regular youth sort of center that they had stuff most nights of the week too. But there was actually we actually sang songs for the service, and there was a young priest that was interested in doing that, and also in doing original musical theater pieces, which he wrote the music for, and he had a collaborator that wrote the lyrics, and they drafted me in to write songs with them for the folk mass. They picked scripture, and I would, tune my guitar funny and find some kind of way into a song that went with that scriptural theme. They would change the words around to fit the music, and I would change the music around to fit the words, and it was like early songwriting. And I'd already been playing and singing in church, and it wasn't a big deal to add that to the equation, to write songs. It just all happened real gradually without a lot of pressure. Justin Moses is a guy I played with in recent years, a great instrumentalist here in Nashville. He said the same thing. He grew up singing with his parents and siblings in church and playing in church, and there was really no, you really couldn't do any wrong. As long as you were, behaving yourself, you could make a mistake and nobody would complain. You just learn. And you get comfortable with that. There's an energy from the audience you learn about really, really quickly, and you try to do your best and everything. But it's not like you're gonna, they're gonna throw you out. So it's really easy. It breeds a comfortable situation.
One more question about Molly. If you could talk about this, if it had any kind of impact on the way that you would relate to like women in music, because you had been playing and singing with Molly for so long, if when you kind of got out there in the quote unquote real world, if that had any impact on you in terms of working with other women musicians?
Well, it was difficult. It was more difficult for Molly to have a solo career than it was for me. She started making her own records. We made a duet record. I was well into the Bluegrass career with Hot Rise, and we did this as a side project. And she got a lot of attention, and she made a solo record, I think. But meanwhile, before she ever did that, she started a family. I had started a family too, but I had a wife who stayed home with the family when I had to go on tour. And Molly, it was harder for her because her husband could pick up a lot of slack, but it was harder for him. Just wasn't his role as much, and it felt right for Molly to maybe be more bound to the home. At least, it just ended up that way. And so I think I noticed that, and I know that it helped for us to tour together, and it helped her get a solo recording, but it was harder for her to sustain it on her own, whereas I could just keep going.
Yeah.
I noticed that really pretty early on, and that's a tough thing. But I'm sensitive to that, and yet I know that I go along without realizing sometimes that I get advantages that others don't have. And I think you see that with some of the artists that, like if I produced Laurie Lewis, for instance, she did not have a family, so she was freer to do that. But she had a violin shop, and she couldn't leave the violin shop and tour as much as I would, because I didn't have that encumbrance. And it's just I don't know, some of the other groups. Kate McLeod's another one. I produced her, and she's a great writer. But again, she was raising children. It's harder for her to get away and do the nitty gritty. She kept writing, but the touring was harder.
You got your first guitar when you were 12, and sounds like you mostly self-taught yourself, and you picked it up right away. You also play fiddle, mandolin, banjo, bouzouki, and mandocello. What kind of learner were you / are you? Like, how easy or difficult is it for you to pick up something new, whether it be instruments or any other kinds of hobbies?
Well, I'm probably fit an Asperger's kind of system, kind of situation. I'm probably really good at certain things, and others it just doesn't occur to me to even ever pay attention to it. Finances, I don't really care about them, unfortunately, and mechanical things. But like reading and writing and playing music are just kind of really natural. The guitar I got one, some friends had them, and I started playing what they were playing on them without having my own, and it was really fun. And so I got my own, and it just kind of happened real fast. It was like, I don't know, the motor skills and my disposition towards it was really friendly, I guess. And the other, when I played a little bit of piano. I took a few piano lessons, but when I got the guitar, it was like I could bring that with me wherever I went. Once I got to where I could play a little bit of music on it, it was a source of self-esteem, too. It was like here's something that I could do. And it was a way of getting over shyness, with people my age. I was okay. I played some sports, but I wasn't really good at it. And I was better at sports that I did on my own, like skiing or playing tennis by myself, the singles. I just wasn't a good team player.
Yeah.
So,
up against the wall.
Yeah. Well, I played with another person, but not in the doubles. I didn't like playing doubles, that kind of thing. So okay. I don't know. So music was kind of a solitary pursuit, and I could measure my progress pretty easily myself by just learning a new song, new chord or whatever, and the aptitude was pretty good. So, and the writing and reading, that was something too. It's like I was more interested in playing with words, than I am with machines, and so it just was. It just kind of fed all the time. It just kind of fed itself, and a new instrument. I'm maybe a little bit distracted too, like ADHD kind of. I'm putting my syndromes on me, diagnosing myself. But you get into a situation with other musicians, and there's 4 guitar players, and then you go, oh, gee, it'd be nice. I heard somebody play a banjo once. That sounds good against all those guitars, or a mandolin or a fiddle. My aunt gave me a fiddle, and she said, maybe, you're playing the guitar, maybe you'd like to try this. And I looked at it and thought, oh, that would be a valuable thing to add, and a valuable skill to add sounds and textures. So if I get bored with one thing, I can, find it on another. So the violin was kind of like a real challenge to get to where I could play it. And I found between the guitar and the violin, a friend had a mandolin. I went, oh, this is how you learn between the two, because the fingering's the same as on the violin, but it's you pluck it like a guitar. So that was really valuable. And so all of a sudden I got 3 instruments that I'm paying attention to. And, a banjo's kind of like a guitar, just slightly tuned different. And the bouzouki and the mandola and the mandolin are all the same. They're all kind of relatively simple systems that are just, they start from a different place in the range of musical scales, and it's just, it's really not that hard. But they're attractive, what's good, I think, about learning a new instrument is you start as a beginner again. And that makes the really simple things interesting again. And it's a way of looking at music anew. And every time, playing a different instrument, tuning the guitar. I used to do that too. I saw Joni Mitchell do that. She'd tune her guitar different for each song, and I went, well, that's pretty cool. And then I figured out some of those tunings and started messing with those. And that's like a different instrument. You're all of a sudden you're a little bit at sea, and you're having to begin again. And I think that's really important.
Okay, this may or may not be an interesting question, but I know a lot of lefties. You're naturally left-handed, but you play the guitar and your other instruments right-handed.
Yeah.
How did that end up happening? Like, I feel like most lefties are like really proud to identify themselves as a left-handed player. So Is that you? Are you a proud lefty? And like, what's it like to live this dual lefty-righty life?
It's funny. It's funny because my older brothers, they played sports, and they threw right. They were right-handed, and so when I started learning to play baseball, I threw right, and I played those, and I played tennis that way. It's funny because I was such a big Beatles fan. I mean, that was one of the reasons I started playing the guitar. And I don't know why I didn't notice that Paul McCartney played his left-handed. But my friends all had right-handed guitars. So I started on theirs. And, whenever it comes up, people say, well, why didn't you learn? How can you do that? How can you play right-handed when you're left-handed? The truth is you use both hands. And they just do different things. Seems like left-handed, on the fingerboard, that seems more detailed and more confusing than the right hand. But right-handed players use their left hand for that fingerboard. So I don't know. In the end, I'm glad that I didn't learn left-handed, because that means I can buy used guitars, aplenty, because there's a lot more right-handed ones. And same with violins and everything else. It just, there is a thing with the touch of the right hand, the manual thing, the touch of it, especially with the violin bow, the subtleties of that. Maybe I would have been better off left-handed, I don't know. But so far, it's worked out,
You went to Colby College in Maine, but you left early to go after music. You eventually made your way to Colorado, where there were lots of open-minded and music-loving people out there, which makes for a good audience. And you said, I knew I would be a musician, but I was wary of any kind of commercial rat race and the pressure to succeed in places like LA, New York, Nashville. Can you expand more on that sentiment and like what is important to you because you cultivated your music in the Colorado type of environment?
Well, I think that in Colorado, it's the open-minded sort of nature of the audience and just people in general. It bred, you were free to do what you felt was good. You if you offered something that you'd worked on and tried to hone and present well, it usually got some ears. And in Nashville, when Hot Rod started showing up in Nashville, I realized people were they're definitely more affected by the big commercial successes and trying to replicate those things. Everybody's looking for the next big thing, and there's a trap where you imitate something, and if you imitate some success, you're usually chasing it. You're not really going to be that success. And it's usually right about the time that something becomes really a trend, something new comes along, which becomes eventually the new trend. It might become the new trend. It might start a new trend. So I was always wary of just trying to follow along with the crowd, and I just wanted to do what I felt strongly about personally. And, I'm really interested, I got to Colorado, I was really interested in Django Reinhardt and that kind of music and, swing jazz stuff. And I was also learning to play the violin and, fiddle and trying to learn more about bluegrass. And that's not like a commercial sounding direction.
No, it is not.
But I found friends who were interested in this, and we were able to form, combined forces, and we had a little band called Ophelia Swing Band, and we learned a lot together, and we brought the music to people who really, a lot of them really appreciated it. And so that was, there's enough reward, enough carrot at the end of the stick to keep you going. It's not like you need, and also like going to New York or Los Angeles, it would be more expensive to live, and you'd have to be playing music that other people wanted. Playing cover in a cover band, in a Holiday Inn just never really appealed to me. I really wanted to write my own stuff or find my own niche, and it was easier to do that in a place like Colorado. A college town is good for that. Just any college town, really.
Yeah, I'm from Boston, and that definitely happens there. So you mentioned Hot Rise, which is the band, but you've also been in New Grange and the Earls of Leicester. Hot Rise formed in 1978, and you played and released records consistently for 12 years. You've done reunion shows and were known as America's most innovative and entertaining bluegrass band. Original member Charles Thile sadly died in 1999. Brian Sutton joined for the reunion shows after that. So I wanted to hear a little bit more about this. Like, it must be very intense to play in a band where someone has passed away. What were those Hot Rise shows like without Charles, and in what ways did he still feel like part of the band?
Charles was a big part of the soul of Hot Rise. He was a great instrumentalist and singer, and he was really, really smart with recording technology and sound technology for live shows as well. And but he was the soul as far as like what our direction was. He started as the bass player, and our guitar player quit, and he moved the guitar, and the music changed when he switched to guitar. It became more what he was good at, which was traditional bluegrass music. And he studied visual art in college. He had a degree, studio art rather, and he was a sculptor, potter, and did some painting and stuff. But he was artistic in how he thought about the music, and he was the one that taught us to sing around one microphone instead of all standing stationary on stage. You get a little choreography going. He said, it's a little bit of sleight of hand. People don't notice that the other instruments are kind of disappearing in the mix when you move around to sing around that one mic. And in fact, we don't all have to play while we're all singing around that mic, And
yeah,
it really
I love that move. That's
it was
smart.
really we learned that particular thing, but also just the way we played and the arrangements and stuff. He was more sensitive to the art of things, and he never liked blow dry bluegrass. He said, "I hate blow dry bluegrass. It's like so perfect that it doesn't sound real." He liked the nitty gritty stuff, and he wanted it to be a clear sound. And he wanted us to play precisely, but he didn't want it to be soulless. He wanted to let certain chances happen, take chances with it. So when he died, I mean, it was a big blow. We weren't a full-time group anymore when he passed away, but we did a lot of reunion shows after 1990, and so those 9 years. He was, we played together, but he started getting sick, and so, we were doing our best to perform when we could with him. And of course, he had difficulty playing as he went on. The last couple of years, it was harder for him to tour. We weren't touring much, but it was harder, and we went through that with him, and we saw a big change in him. He was also like a triple Virgo. He was like really fastidious about sound systems and about his guitars, about his clothes. He was the one that sort of suggested we wear suits, and dress up for shows. And for him to get really sick like that, and his looks changed, and a lot of stuff that used to bother him stopped bothering him because he was facing a whole different kind of challenge. So we learned a lot from him as he went through that. And when he passed away, all of a sudden we had a summer of several gigs that we were going to do with him. And so we did them as a tribute to him. And we hired different people, and mostly Peter Rowan. He had been playing with Peter Rowan a lot when he wasn't playing with Hot Rise. And so we drafted Peter to be our guitarist, and that only worked for a little while because Peter wasn't really going to buy into being a member of Hot Rise. And so we needed somebody that would just fill Charles's role. But it was really hard to find anybody that could. Pete was great for the soul factor, but we had Jeff White, we had Jim Hurst, all great players. David Greer played once. We played at Steve Martin's wedding. But when we got Brian was really good because he grew up with Hot Rise music, and he understood that Charles's guitar role was unique. It wasn't like a Tony Rice role. It wasn't like a Lester Flatt role. It was a Charles Sawtelle role. And, listening to that music and internalizing it from a grade school age was really a key thing for his qualification there. And but Charles is always in the back there when you're touring without him and playing on a show or even recording without him. You think about how he would say, what we should do. We ask ourselves that question all the time.
So your wife, Jan Fabricius?
Yeah.
How do you say her name?
Yeah.
Fabricius. Jan Fabricius writes, tours, and records with you, and it seems like her addition to your music was pretty natural. How has that organic origin of your musical partnership impacted the way you play together?
Well, we met at Bluegrass festivals, and then when we started dating, we would, I didn't even know that she sang when we started dating. I knew that she played a little bit of mandolin, so we started playing mandolins together. And that's really great for just hanging around the house and just for fun. I don't play fiddle on stage much anymore, but I get to play it around with her, play fiddle tunes at home that she knows, and we learn them together. And that's great. You're learning stuff together is really important. And then we started singing together. Her harmony, and I was doing a session, had a couple people over here at the house, and I was just trying to make a home recording of this song. And she was singing along off to the side, and I just grabbed her and pulled her into the microphone, and that was the first time she had recorded a vocal or anything, and it just sounded good.
She was up for it?
Yeah, she was up for it. I just kind of grabbed her, and all of a sudden she was singing harmony on the same mic as me, which, normally you'd plan it ahead and have another mic for her, but we were just ready to do it, and it ended up being on a record. It's Tulips on a Table on the Pompadour record. When she started singing, I said, wow, that's really good. She just finds the harmony parts real naturally. So it's a great bond as a couple to have something to do for fun. And then it's become part of our livelihood as, making a living. It's in one way we never get away from one another, but in another way we have to get along. We have to one reinforces the other. It's kind of a family business now, and we started writing songs together, and that's that increases the bond and helps a lot of things along. We have to meet in the middle. I'll work to teach her things that expands her musical knowledge and her repertoire, and she'll keep me down to earth. And I think it's kind of helpful. I mean, she's been playing music all her life, but never really constantly until, never having to on stage or anything like that. It was always informal until she started playing with me on stage. So it's kind of it's a process of finding the middle ground and trying to strengthen that as much as possible.
I want to talk about being funny. You have a reputation for being funny, especially due to Hot Rise's comic alter ego, Red Knuckles and the Trailblazers. And there are funny moments on your new album in your writing. What has it been like for you to incorporate humor into your music, like in performing and in writing? And what benefits to your music do you see in being a funny guy?
Well, I don't know. I think maybe it's my family, they were always making wisecracks around the dinner table or in the car and driving around together. And my mother liked to play practical jokes, and my dad really had a lighthearted attitude towards life. He was always willing to consider our requests for frivolous things like guitars and, amplifiers and stuff. But I think, I like the idea of somebody like Roger Miller, who really was irreverent with his music. The Beatles were always really funny. They were really kind of quirky, with their responses in interviews and things. And it's hard for I think if you put on a show, somebody like the folk musician, Irish folk legend Mick Maloney said, you want people to laugh, you want them to cry, you want them to tap their foot and maybe think about something that they hadn't thought about. Those are some of the things you can do with a musical performance. And so a little of each, really, and how you structure a concert or a presentation, a little of this, a little of that, and a little funny thing right at the right time will set off. It keeps things from being too heavy, And it's the humor is you find it where you can find it. I don't really plan it, but I stumble on things, and you remember them. It's just a trial and error. You remember jokes at work, and you just remember them, and they're filed away. And when the opportunity comes, you can grab them.
I did want to ask you about my favorite song on the record, Little Lamb, which was inspired by seeing lambs romping around in Ireland. I am very drawn to that song because I used to raise lambs when I was a kid, and there's like nothing like seeing a baby lamb do that like sideways stomp after their mom like down a hill.
Yeah.
So that song is like really, really sweet, but there is an undertone, like there is an edge to it. Can you talk about writing such a positive song about something like so adorable like lambs without being like too cheesy or too naive?
Well, I think that little bittersweet part of it, the bitter part added to the sweet keeps it from being too kind of a trite song. I mean, comparing the newborn lamb to your old age advancing, is a good way, and it's about, and it's kind of like you ask about how to age well, and that's kind of it. You pay attention to the youngest among you, and let that inspire you. That's the thing. It's like this life goes on, and this is proof of it. And joy, there's a lot of joy in just being alive. And the youngest ones among you can sort of remind you of that when you're kind of bogged down in the day-to-day. And I think that's springtime is that way in general. I think spring is like new growth, budding trees. It's like creativity in visible form. And a newborn baby is always like a reassuring thing to me. I said, yeah, life is going on where we can continue. And you talk to a kid that's just come back from school and they've learned something, and it's really inspiring to me to get down in there with that and realize not only that it's still happening, but it's not happening just for them, and you could do it too. But it's also accepting that you're not going to be around forever, but everything else is going to continue. And I think that's with the music. My music is it's good for certain things, and it will represent a time and place as after I'm gone maybe, and but I'm really just doing what other people have done, and I know when a new musician like Sarah Jarosz comes up, I go, hey, she's following in my path. She's going to take that baton and she's going to do a great job with it, and I applaud that. Is I'm not going to be able to keep up forever.
This is a good time to ask this question. You've talked about the future of bluegrass. You said it's like a venerable old tree that's healthy. The roots are growing just as well as the branches, and that it's cool to see the next generation build upon the tradition of bluegrass, like players like Sarah Jarosz and Chris Thile. For you, what have been some problems of the bluegrass genre, and how have you seen those problems evolve and be solved, if they have been solved?
Well, one of the things in bluegrass is it's very much music of Southern whites, and we have so much music. So much of the music is influenced by the African American element. The slave population brought the banjo. kind of rhythms. The rhythms that are in bluegrass are kind of, and jazz are a result of that influence. But none of the people playing it have that. They don't reflect that. And the other thing is, there's been very few women in bluegrass historically, with exceptions like all the greats, Bill Monroe, Lester Flatt, Ralph Stanley. They learned from their mothers. They learned the songs from their mothers, and maybe even their instrumental skills. But their mothers were not going to be out there performing. And it's just over and over you hear that story. But that's changing. And there are people of color playing bluegrass, and there are people, there's people of all sexual persuasions playing bluegrass too now. We have, bluegrass pride events and that kind of thing. So it's changing, but the music is kind of, in some ways, is associated with a Southern culture, which I don't always interface with. And I think the diversity in the music has really helped that. That still exists. There's sort of a prejudice kind of against women and against people of color in the music, I think. But it's sort of sectioned off. And I think, people just don't want to deal with it. A certain crowd doesn't want to deal with it. And that's okay, I guess. But it's improving. And at least there's room. Audiences are able to find all spectrums now, and that's helpful. But the music, it gets imitative, and it's every once in a while somebody comes around and changes it up. I think Chris Thile has done a really good job of expanding the possibilities of a string band, and really, the way you compose songs. He can do longer form things that are not just instrumental music. They can include thematic vocal things. I don't know, that the technology of the music is changed. The way it's presented with modern electronics and sound systems and stuff, it gets a little bit, taking it out of the smaller venues and putting it on giant stages, and everybody kind of plugging in. It's not as intimate a performance, and it doesn't. I don't know, there's something about playing without the pickups and moving around on mics that's hard to reproduce with pickups. And it's they're doing it better at it all the time. But, it's a change. In-ear monitors are another thing. It's a great thing. Really helps the sound performance. It helps the musicians hear each other better. It helps the guy working the sound to bring it to the audience because they're not interfering with the monitors. But then there's an isolation, because you're just only hearing your band members, and you don't really hear the audience as much. So, I think you just kind of continue to evolve, and you kind of temper those things and learn other ways to interface. But it's always, kids are learning the music in different ways. When cassettes came in, that was a brilliant thing. People started trading tapes. They could record they could make copies of those tapes and trade with their friends. CDs came in, and people learned how to rewind those CDs just play it 2 seconds at a time, and learn these things like little kids learned how to work the controls better than I could. And it's just the new technology, YouTube. I mean, think about how that's changed. One of the greatest educational tools in the world ever. Mm-hmm. And it's just kind of revolutionizing things. We don't even know how much it's changing things. So, I think the technology helps, but it can get in the way at times. It can make things a little flat. And perfection, Pro Tools is like you can tune everything up and put it exactly in time, and it gets to where it's not really real anymore. And I think that's a danger. But, the kids coming up, they think that people should sing that way. You have to know how to sing the way that it sounds when you've auto-tuned. And some of them can actually do it. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. The technology changes the way the music is played and sung and how it comes across. And but I think in general, people are always looking for the real human connection and the real something homemade, something that's, you know, the one thing that can't be reproduced is a live performance. And, you know, you can record it, you can make a videotape of it, but you're not there. And I don't think that value will never go away.
All right. Do you have time to do the lightning round?
The lightning round.
It's very fun.
Okay.
You won't regret it.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Tim O'Brien. You are a chef. What is your favorite food to make?
Pasta.
Like handmade pasta or just put it in the pot?
No, I've bought a sauce. I make a sauce.
What book should I read next?
The Overstory.
Who is your favorite up-and-coming musician?
Bella White.
Nice. Mine too. Okay, besides Red, what are your nicknames that you can share?
Oh, what am I? Rusty.
Rusty.
Rusty is my alter ego that gets real sort of touchy-feely, and he's the life of the party, or he's like crying all the time, something like that.
What was the first piece of music you bought with your own money?
It was probably a Beatles 45. I don't know what it was. Might have been Day Tripper.
You still have it?
No.
Dang.
Not that. Not the 45.
What is your favorite road snack?
Corn nuts.
Who is the greatest singer of all time?
It might be Jerry Lee Lewis.
Okay, this is the last question. Where is the most beautiful place in the world?
I think it's in Ireland.
Anywhere specific? Or all of
Dingle.
Ireland?
I think Dingle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dingle.
Yeah.
All right, Tim O'Brien, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today, and congrats on the new album. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
This episode of Basic Folk was produced by John Nungesser. Alex Stanton composes our music. Basic Folk is on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network. You can check out all of our episodes there, wherever you get podcasts. You can search for us on the SiriusXM app under Basic Folk, or you can check out our website, basicfolk.com. Thanks for listening all the way to the end, and if you like this episode, please share it with a friend. You know, maybe you're about to go to a Bluegrass festival, and you can bring a little Bluetooth speaker and play it by the fireside, and everybody can listen and drink their kombucha and their CBD seltzers and have a good time. Maybe that's something you could do. I mean, it's just an idea. It's just an idea. Okay, thanks again. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.